Good afternoon. Mike Haggerty again here with you on Heads Up Podcast, sponsored by our National Wrestling Coaches Council. And Mike, it's good to see you back again. It seems like we just jumped off of our last podcast, but here we are again. And man, we've got a real treat for everybody. Jen Baldwin and Jennifer, this is your second go around with us. And Tim Johnson, your first go with us. So we welcome you guys to the podcast. And obviously seeing you two together probably indicates that we're going to be talking a lot about the Greg Strobel leadership team. So Mike, I know that we've been looking forward to this one. We've talked about it a couple times. And Jen, probably kick it off with you since you are the old hat here. Tell us what's happening right now that, with Greg Strobel leadership.
Yeah, of course. So it's been really, really exciting. We're actually starting today, day 8 of the 30-day Make a Weight Challenge, which is very exciting. It's our second year of doing this challenge. Last year, we started very, very organically, and in a lot of respects, very much to pay homage and respect to my dad, right? To just really have an opportunity for the community to come together. And what's really, really neat is seeing the community continue to do that, and also recognizing that the work that's been done within GSLA so far, and the work that Mike and I have partnered on to really try to bring some very good content to our athletes. We're seeing, just so many things happen, but right now we're in day 8. So I guess my mind is very focused on 30 days, and being that today is day 8, we're really, really excited about that. We have 3 excellent social media platforms that we're seeing a lot of traction on. I loved yesterday, there was a tweet that went out, and we saw that retweeted and retweeted again and retweeted again and again with some coaching concepts that my dad had. And we're just really, really excited about it. So right now we're in the middle of a challenge, which is built on the 4 pillars of the Greg Strobel Leadership Academy. So accountability, family, discipline, and a lifetime of good habits. And we're just excited to have another great year of raising funds for this program so that we can continue to bring good content to our people. So I guess that's my elevator speech right there. How was it?
That was pretty darn good. I mean, you brought us up to speed. That was pretty impressive. Jen, the thing that always excites me about having you on is that you exemplify that energy that Greg had.
Thank you.
It's like you can just see it popping out, the big smile, the excitement, and fired up about everything. And so we really appreciate that.
Thank you.
And Tim, you join us today. And I know you are a lifetime friend of Greg's, and just really a pleasure to have you on. You've played so many roles in the sport of wrestling over the years, along with your FCA vice president in the Midwest region. I think that's your current role. I don't know if that's exactly the right title, but I also know that, being the sports commentator for the Big Ten Network, we listen to you on a weekly basis, and we often have times a conversation about some of the matches and stuff and some of the things that are taking place. But it's a pleasure to have you on the show, Tim, and talking about Greg. And thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. And if I'm talking about Greg right now, it's really easy for me to do. But I'll just start out by saying that I get a little emotional. I miss Greg often. He's my best friend in heaven. And 40 years ago, first of all, I know that most of our viewers, and the reason for being is to encourage the coach. And I think that I have a saying that never underestimate the power and influence of the coach. Mm-hmm. And all I ever wanted to do since I was 12 years old was be a coach because of a coach, Coach Bob Dara. I was in a little town in Morning Sun, Iowa, and he started the wrestling program there and then went on and had the dynasty at Dowling, but he's the greatest influence in my life, and I wanted to be a coach because of a coach. In 1979, Ron James, who had been the coach at Cedar Rapids Prairie, and the Zaleskis and Barry Davis, had left and gone to Oregon. And we had a plan, Lisbon, Brad Smith, Mount Vernon, and Cedar Rapids Prairie, to take a bus of 40 wrestlers out to Dale Thomas, the head wrestling coach at Oregon State's wrestling camp. It's before there were videos on buses. I mean, imagine. Well, Ron moves, and Brad bails on me. And so me and one other coach took 40 kids on a bus cross country from Iowa to Corvallis, Oregon, out to Dale Thomas's farm. And as I was entering, I looked over and there was this guy in shorts on a bike reaching up into an apple tree to get an apple. And I thought, we got a Greek god here at this wrestling camp. And it was Greg Strobel, the summer '79. Now I had a 16-year-old Barry Davis with me, a 15-year-old Greg Strobel with me. I mean, a Greg Randall with me, some real studs out there. And it was going to be tremendous. Well, Greg really saved the camp because we didn't know that Dale Thomas was just going to use us to keep building his farm and cut tansy. And I mean, we slept on the mats, and Greg slept on the mats with us, was the key clinician, and we connected. That's the summer of '79. And then in 1983, I had been with USA Wrestling for about 6 months, and Steve Combs was looking to expand the staff to find a national teams director. And I said, there's one guy. It's Greg Strobel. And then contrary to Jen's mom's desires, Donna, they moved to Stillwater, Oklahoma, where we were. And it was a highlight in my life when Greg came to Stillwater, and we teamed up then for several years with USA Wrestling, and that was the beginning of a great friendship and teammate in wrestling.
Yeah.
Well, that's an incredible backdrop. But then, what took place after that, Tim? As you move forward, you had a dynamic relationship, obviously, with Greg, in different roles. As Greg became the national teams director for many years, you went on and had a career. We were just talking prior to the show with coaches education and played different parts and components in that. So bring us a little bit, give us a little bit more history on what you were doing and how you tied that in with Greg.
Yeah, I'd love to. So in the spring of '83, Greg comes out, and it was just like we had this big ball of clay, because when I went to, I left Mount Vernon and joined the United States Wrestling Federation, USWF. And 1 month after I got to Stillwater, we became USA Wrestling, the national governing body. And, we didn't know what to do with that. And Greg and I had a lot of opportunity to speak in and develop what USA Wrestling became. And one thing, Greg and I had a common bond as a believer and follower of Jesus Christ, and we would meet at this little store across, I don't know what it's still called, but this little gas station called Get and Gallop. Of course, in Oklahoma, that's what the Get and Gallop, when we would meet a couple of times a year. And you can just see Greg. We would open God's word and we would just read some scripture, and then Greg, he'd go, "Can you believe that? Can you believe that?" He goes, "It's true." And then he would apply it. He would tell how that had applied in his life. And he would talk about his childhood growing up and how his mom had instilled faith in him. And then this is how it works, Tim. And so we meet together a couple of times and a week at about 7 o'clock in the morning there. And that was a tremendous thing. And then in '84, I had the opportunity to move to California and to direct the 1984 Olympic Games. And here's a thought that I have that's real also about Greg. So I had an opportunity to bring a lot of people. I had 400 people to fill, 6 months to do it. It was a story on why I stepped in the last 6 months is another story for another time, but it wasn't going as it should go. And we were able to have a tremendous Olympics, but Greg came out. Donna became my administrative assistant during that time. I want to tell you, one of the great love stories in history is Greg and Donna Strobel.
Thank you.
It's one of the great love stories I've ever seen. And just an incredible, and it's the whole story and how it culminated is a story for another time, but it's all about love. And so When I think of Greg and Donna coming out, became great friends of my wife, Lisa, and I, and we had a tremendous time in the 1984 Olympics. And then I would call Greg, as you all know, the Renaissance man of all Renaissance men. I mean, he could do everything. I mean, he could do it all. And here's the deal, you guys that know Greg, he knew he could. You know, and yet he was always very first. He knew it was all a gift from the Lord.
Right.
Greg was confident in who he was, and he knew who he was of his identity in Christ, and he knew that he was fearfully and wonderfully made, and he acted like it. That's what I loved about Greg. I mean, this was not a prideful. He knew who he was, and he acted like it. How many of us? I remember, you know, I bet Greg. Well, first of all, Greg never cut a lot of weight, so he was smarter than a lot of us. But if we're going to cut weight now, if I was coaching again, from a understanding of how you do things, you know, you should know who you are and act like it. And so you don't want the whole school to know you're cutting weight like I did. I let every teacher and everybody know my face was gone. I had my head down on the deal. You know, I haven't had a glass of water in 3 days. And I probably told that 20 times to somebody. Greg would never do that. Greg would have a countenance on his face, whether it was a good day or a bad day. And he acted and walked like the victor that he was. And talk about some of the things, what he could do. So I moved from Stillwater to Wichita, Kansas to direct the Metropolitan YMCA's. He and Pavel Katzen, former Greco, they come up and in a full day, they build my deck. I mean, from scratch, you know, build my deck because Greg could do everything. There's nothing that he couldn't do. And then, of course, you know, USA Wrestling moved to Colorado Springs, which made Donna and the kids very happy, or at least Donna. I mean, you know, Stillwater's appropriately named. And what's interesting is for the last 30 years or the last 15 years, I've lived in Champaign, Illinois for 30. I've lived on 2607 Stillwater Drive. That's my address right now. But just to, as you asked me, my enthusiasm and my great love for Greg. Of course, he had his time at Foxcatcher, and he knew when to leave.
Yeah.
And then he was at Lehigh, and I mean, you guys understand the Lehigh Valley. You don't break into that. It's a mindset. It's an understanding. It's a culture. Greg, West Coasters come into the East, and he brings his understanding of the Lehigh Valley mindset and added to it and left a legacy, a culture that only Greg Strobel could do. And then what I love about him, he was calling me, hey, Tim, he says, I'm going to retire and I'm going to take this opportunity as assistant athletic director. And a couple of thoughts on that. One, you know, whatever, he just knew it was the right time, and he threw himself into this new job that he knew nothing about. And that's what he was excited about, that he knew nothing about it and he had so much to learn. And I would just say this, if you're talking about what Greg has taught me, if you're going to leave on your own terms, you better leave early. And so, you know, and so I'm on my descent now, and so a lot of things that I do, I better think about leaving here pretty soon if I want to leave on my own terms. And so, you know, I would just say that whatever Greg put himself into, he put everything in there. And I wrote down about 7 C's. I said he had strength of character. He developed and had a culture of confidence, consistency with no compromise in the majors. So he didn't major in the minors. I mean, he was very, very gracious about the minors, but he didn't compromise on the major things in his life. And then he was compassionate. He brought about chemistry, and then it was all out of a foundation and a commitment to Christ. And so you can tell that I obviously share an enthusiasm for life, with Greg, and I miss not doing it with Greg. And it's great. It's very healthy to be able to share about him. So I wasn't as concise as Jen was. You egged me on.
Well, Tim, I have to say, there's like 3 quick things I want to comment on because I love everything you just said about Dad. And as you're talking, I'm like, wow, obviously the friendship that you two had, it has always been so transparent, real, and I've seen it over my whole lifetime. I can remember us coming to your house when we had moved to Oklahoma and having spent time with you and your family. And I was thinking about 2 quick stories. One, it's unfortunate my mom did not like Stillwater the way we all did, because talk about a great place to grow up. We had so much fun there, and it was a great time. And I'll never forget my dad at one point, who knows what he had to go for, because he was always doing something with wrestling, but he was in Colorado Springs at the OTC, and my mom had it. I mean, she was done. And she put my sister and I and the dog in a car, and she's like, that's it, we're going to Colorado. And I'm like, Mom, I was a kid, and I'm like, Mom, do you know where we're going? She's like, nope, but we are out of here. And she took us in that van, and we drove straight to Colorado Springs, right into the Olympic Training Center. And I'm like, do you even know where Dad is? She's like, nope, but we're going to find him because I am done with Oklahoma. And sure enough, we just happened to pull in when I guess the athletes were walking around. Maybe it was after practice. You should have seen my dad's face. He looks up and he's like, Donna, kids, what are you doing here? And she's like, I'm done. I'm done with Oklahoma. It was hilarious. Best write up. Totally depressing for her coming home because we obviously had to turn around and come back. So that's one that I wanted to share. And just one little thing. It's interesting too, talking about Dad's ability with humility to recognize his strengths. I've just always been captivated by. And Tim, you had brought up his family. You talked, earlier on, you talked about family and those type of things. And it's very interesting. Back when I think we had just recently moved to Bethlehem, when my dad got the job at Lehigh, and he had built a dining room table. And it was beautiful. And he loved woodworking. I mean, of course, we need to have a table for the new dining room, right? And he was very proud. I mean, very proud of it, very happy with the work that he had done. And my grandma, so my dad's mom, came to visit, and my dad was so excited. He's like, Mom, look what I built and look what I did. And look, I did it in this amount of time, and it was so fast, and I did this. And you want to talk about someone who could just make sure things were in perspective. Another wonderfully godly woman was my grandma. She said, Greg, no one's ever going to remember how fast you built it. They're only going to remember how well it's built. And that exact thing is actually in, like, as I look at notes from my dad and things that I look at now over time, because I've got like his library of content that he chose to keep in the house right now. And he has that written down as well. Greg, no one's going to remember how fast you built it. They're only going to remember how well it's built. And that type of influence I always saw in him, if that makes sense. But to be able to see those moments where clearly, like to his mom, he wanted to shine, but she was very quick to remind him of who he was and who he is. I just always thought that was awesome, because I saw that always in him in many things, right? An ability to understand what you're capable of, but always recognizing where you came from and being humble enough to know who you are. And that's just something that I always, just a story that I will there's many stories clearly I will never forget, but those are 2 just based, Tim, on some stuff that you were saying that I thought might be kind of a tickle. So,
and when you talk about humility, I mean, this is what was most attractive to me about Greg was his humility, and that it didn't look the same as what people thought humility should look like. And so he walked with great confidence. So some people thought he was cocky, and he was not. He was not. And so it's really neat to see. And so I think about that, and I don't do that well. And I want to walk. am I a victor for who I am? I've been fearfully and wonderfully made. And I think of Greg because people think, well, if you act confident overly, then you must be arrogant. And he was not. He was humble. And yet I'm going, that's a different way of actually glorifying God and who you can be. So it's really a cool legacy, your dad's.
Tim, this sounds like being non-judgmental, right? Same Jen. For our coaches that are listening, right? What do we do as coaches? We look for problems. We look to fix problems. And with our athletes, we can come across very judgmental if we don't have that relationship with the athletes. So what are some of the things that our coaches and everybody listening, right? How do we do that non-judging piece? How do we incorporate that in our lives?
I would say that just very concisely, and I think I can do that. Life's about relationships. So don't transfer that into your coaching. It's about relationships. So therefore, if it's about relationships, it's not a program. It's got to be about each individual athlete, and then work really hard at thinking the best of each athlete, because we don't have to work hard to think of the worst. Okay. The discipline comes in to, am I thinking the best of my assistant coaches, of my head coach, if I'm an assistant coach? Am I working hard at that? And then do I remember that life's about relationships? So in other words, just in my leadership in FCA, I've had examples, but by having my number one priority that life's about relationships, that trumps my vision. In other words, a coach that says we're going to win the state. Well, okay, but if that is your number one thing and it trumps relationships, you've missed it all. You've missed it all.
Even if you win?
Even if you win, what is the win? Relationships. That's why you've been brought in this position to impact lives. And so therefore, I'm going to mess this up, but Morgan Wooten, very famous basketball coach at DeMatha High School, has a great, he's since passed on, but he was a basketball coach in DeMatha, and I think of the Maryland area. And he said, coaches get it all wrong. They get the cart before the horse. They use their players to develop the team instead of the team to develop the players. In other words, they were in it for themselves and their glory versus a greater glory. And I am the first to admit that's where I was as a young coach. In Mount Vernon, they'd say had a pretty good successful coach from 77 to 82. And I would say they didn't even have a shadow of what I could have been if I would known it was about relationships and about others instead of me. So to your question, life's about relationships, and it's not about you.
Yes, that's a good point. If you don't mind, Mike, I'm going to add to that because it's as Tim is talking about relationships, I had a very similar perspective, and I think that it's also that when you are a coach, and I know you talk about grassroots, but we've also got our coaches that have been around for a period of time. I would say that if anyone is in a position of influence, whether you are a brand new coach, an assistant coach, you've been a tenured coach for quite some time, there is an absolute responsibility to be mindful of the relationships and the human beings that those positions of influence have the opportunity to influence. And that's for good, which would be, in my opinion, the best, or the hope, if you will. And that influence can be used for all the wrong things as well. And when I think about people, which are coaches, are influencers of minds, whether they're 5-year-old minds, 10-year-old minds, 25-year-old minds, whatever, is that it is an absolute responsibility to draw out the best in people. And to Tim's point, it is not about you, it's about them. So if you make it about them, the athletes, I think you're more likely, and I say this not as an athletic coach, but as a coach of people. And it's what I do in my everyday world, is have the opportunity to coach people, is that you can then see in them the things that, one, need to be addressed, maybe need to be redefined, maybe, help draw out the things that make them better. And if you make it about them, it's impossible to make it about you. And I also heard a quote once that if you help enough people get what they want, you will always get what you want. So you have to make it about them first. So that's just one piece that I have, is just the importance of using sometimes I even call it your superpowers, right? That the Lord has given all of us. Use your superpowers for good, influence the right way, help bring people up. And Mike, obviously, as you know, that's one of the things we talk about all the time in the GSLA, right? Is unleashing human potential. I would offer that that's unleashing human potential for all the right and good things, right? And so when you're a coach and you have the opportunity to spend time with the minds and hearts of people, it better be for good.
That word potential, and maybe Coach Haggerty, throw it out to everybody. Anytime I've heard the word potential, it's because somebody didn't live up to it. They had a lot of potential. This kid, he really had a lot of potential. Or, she really could have gone a long ways. And then that's where the noise gets in, and situations happen where they get distracted, and then they don't reach that potential. Right? Very rarely do you hear of somebody saying, they were way above their potential, because that seems to be a rare case. That's like the Rudy Rudiger, right? The Notre Dame movies. Like that's why people who overachieve potential are, they make movies about them, because it doesn't happen that often. But a lot of people tend to fall short. So this piece about influencing and coaches being mindful sounds like you're making it like we need to be deliberate about these relationships that we're building. How do I do that and still win?
First of all, in ASEP, we called it a compliment sandwich. Okay. All right. And so you just got to remember that, because if you're not bringing truth, if you know truth, then you in no way are loving somebody. Okay. But how you bring truth is important. So, you got the bottom of the bun, and that is, you're good. And then you bring in the meat. Here's some places that we can improve. And then you say, but remember, you're good. You're on your way. That's how you put the bun on top. Sure. But, and I learned that a long time ago. And, and also ASEP, one of the great phrases is, we know who's coaching our kids, but who's coaching our coaches. Okay. And I could go off on that all day long. But one of my very best Gable story, and he was my broadcast partner, Dan Gable, for for 10 years. And it's interesting that when we say Gable now, we might not think of Dan Gable first. Isn't that interesting? I was in 1998, a year after Dan had retired. My producer, Doug Brooker at Iowa Public Television, Doug Brown had retired. I was going to move from analyst to play-by-play, and we wanted Dan Gable to come on. And we're sitting in his chalet office behind his house north of Iowa City. Mike Zappital built it, a little thing. Chad Zappital. He said, "Hey, you got $30,000. Go build me a little office and a sauna." And $100,000 later, Chad had built this place out there. And so we're sitting there and asking him to join us. And Dan's rocking like this, and he's rubbing his hands. And he says, "Everything I've ever done, I want to be the best. I want to be the best. This would be no different." And he kind of looks up, then he looks down, and then all of a sudden he goes, "Timmy, you're good, but you can be better." And I'm 45 years old at the time. I sit up and I'll tell you what, I go, "Yes, sir, coach." And, I was just telling that story at a golf event that Dan was helping us with in Southeast Iowa, an FCA golf event. Dan's standing beside, I'm telling the story to 100 golfers, and they laugh. And Dan looks at me after he goes, "You got better, didn't you?" And so, but that's what he did, Mike. He did first of all, he said, "You're good."
Yeah.
There's a big difference if he had said, and see, our coaches think the best So where are they doing it? Is it even an upset that they're walking through the door every day? And if it is, then compliment them on that. And so, one quote though that I think, and so in other words, that idea of you're good, but you can be better, I hear Gable saying into my head almost every day. But another quote I like is, the better you get, the better you better get.
Yeah. Good one.
The better you get, the better you better get. And I just, I'm mentoring one. I mean, if people say, oh, Johnson's for this team and that team, I got one team. It's Chattanooga. My son-in-law, the Kyle Rochelle, is the head coach at Chattanooga, and by golly, not only is he a great husband to my daughter Allie, but he just gave me my first grandchild, Otto Elijah, and I get to mentor some of those wrestlers, and I said to one of their better wrestlers, enjoy and embrace the target on your back now, because he's the best in the conference, and I said, chew on this one. The better you get, the better you better get. And he came back and he said, I didn't have to chew too long. I love that. And so that's kind of what I think about how do we help the athletes, tell them the truth, but encourage them at the same time.
Right.
And that's, Coach Hag, did you have anything on that?
The only thing you mentioned the word potential, right? And I have a real problem with potential, the term potential alone, in that somebody's predetermined what that means. If you say somebody didn't live up to their potential, or this person has a high end potential, you're making some real strong assumptions that you have the insight to know exactly what that person is capable of doing, both on the high end and the low end. And I find that very, very, very scary, because one, you could limit that individual's growth by thinking that you have defined what their potential is, or you could set them up for failure. And I think the rewards are always in the effort. And that if somebody's invested, there's a commitment. Mike, I've talked to you a lot about the idea of creating awareness first to know where you're at in the big scope and the big picture of things, and then always followed by the commitment. And if that commitment is strong enough, then you're probably going to drive that potential to the highest level. So I try never to define what the potential is of any given athlete. And so over the years, it's been one of those like, hey, we may discover the potential together working as a coach and an athlete, but to predefine that and say, I just don't think they're really living up to potential. It's like, well, what does that really mean? Because I'm the one that's setting those boundaries.
Right.
And I think that's not really fair to the athlete. And I certainly am not. I've been in the coaching game for a long time, and I'm not gifted to have that particular insight. But working together, we'll probably top in if we all do things like all the things that Timmy mentioned, and Jen, you've mentioned, and if we have that buy-in, then through that commitment, then we'll find the behavior, the be in this process, what that behavior looks like, and that's what it's really about to me. And I know it's sort of funny, Tim, to steer in, to weave in a little bit what you were saying about Greg. I sensed that arrogance in the beginning, and it was unwarranted, but that was what I saw when I first met him at USA Wrestling, and it bothered me. And it's like, who does this guy really think he is? That was my question. I didn't go out on a limb to share that with people, but I felt this. But then when I got to know him and understood for who he was, it was actually, I wouldn't say it was the opposite, but because it was confidence, but it was a very solid confidence in just who he was. And like you said, he had the ability to do a lot of things, because I think he felt like he could, either if he didn't know it, he would figure it out. And that's what I so much appreciated about him. I do have a story, though, that shows he did fail at something. All right. So all this talk about how great he was, I've got to tell you a story about how he failed.
And then we'll talk about your officiating.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. That was bad.
You're my new best friend. Oh my gosh, that was awesome.
I love it. That was fair. And I can accept that, because I have my confidence and I know who I am.
And now he doesn't officiate anymore. He's just going to evaluate officials. Okay.
What did you say about stepping out at the right time?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Okay.
But anyway, but Greg and I did really start to develop a relationship, and I got to know him well. And one day we were at the training center together, and Greg came up to me and he goes, "Hey, Hag, let's go fishing. Let's go fishing." And I go, "Sure, man. I would enjoy that. I'm not good at it," but he goes, "No, we're going fly fishing." And I go, "Oh man, I've never done that." But I knew that my grandfather was a really good fly fisherman. And it was like my grandfather had long passed. And it's like, you know what? This is sort of like, I'm going to make my grandfather proud. You know, I had that weird feeling like Greg Strobel is taking me fly fishing. So I'm going to learn how to do something my grandfather was really good at that I never had a chance to challenge myself. So we go to the Colorado River. Right. We had I don't know how long a drive, but it's a pretty good drive to get to the river. And he's got waders for me. He's got all the tools that I need. He's got the fly rod. I'm sure he gave me the beginner's fly rod, whatever that was. And so he sort of shows me the motions and how to bring the string back in. And we're out in this river, in the Colorado River, and we're there for quite some time. We don't have any bites at all. No strikes, no nothing. And it's like Greg was getting a little frustrated. And it's like, man, we've been here for like an hour. And he goes, "This just isn't right." He goes, "This isn't right." And then so I'm having a blast because I've learned how to let the lines trickle down, and then I bring it in and throw it over here and let it trickle down. So I feel like I'm really somebody, right? And so finally, Greg just gets very frustrated after we probably there for an hour and a half. And he goes, "Come on, let's go, man." He goes, "I don't think anything's happening here." So we get out, and all of a sudden this ranger comes up and he goes, "How was the fishing, guys?" And Greg goes, "Not so good." He goes, "I've been here many, many times." He goes, this ranger says, "Well, there's no fish in there. Look up the river. They've just dammed this all up." And he goes, so there was absolutely no fish in the river at all. So it's like Greg was so frustrated, and it was like just one of those moments, you know, I've never seen him like that. He was very, the humility had to come out at that point. He goes, "We're going to do this again."
I love that the ranger said, "How was the fishing?"
Yeah, he set us up, man.
That's good. I don't think many people have. I mean, the reality is, how often have you seen Greg visibly frustrated, aside for Jen and her family? Not often. And so that's a great story.
Yeah, it was one of those that I felt, but he handled it well. You know, he wasn't barking. He wasn't complaining. It was just like, this isn't right. Those are kind of this wasn't right. So it's like, we kept going for a while, and then that's enough. We're done. So we moved on.
There's a lot to learn through fishing. That's for sure.
Yeah.
There's a lot of life lessons through fishing.
No doubt. Hey, and while we've alluded a lot to the fact, and I know that not everybody that's seeing this particular podcast maybe saw the first one, Jen and Mike, can you tell us a little bit more about what the Greg Strobel Leadership Program is really about? And so people could understand what we've kind of been referring to over the last, 30, 35 minutes.
It's here to support our senior national team athletes. And I believe that that's the pathway where education on leadership and values and support is going to help trickle down to our U23s and our high school age athletes and our youth athletes. We've already got our athlete development model. So we're trying to do long-term focus on how we develop our youth. But it's important that we invest this type of a resource into our senior team athletes, right? These concepts where we've talked to our national team coaching staff, Jen, and so many who are supporting the GSLA, put together a survey for our national team coaches. What are the gaps that these athletes face that aren't necessarily gaps that coaches fix? And then we heard from the athletes when we did a survey with them. What are the gaps that you face that frustrate you? And there's a lot of parallels. There are things like, how do I manage my finances? How do I get into coaching? Right. Whether I'm still excited about wrestling and I'm still on the national team now, or whether I'm transitioning from wrestling, how do I get into coaching? That was a wake up for me in the coach education office, thinking that maybe there are senior national team athletes that don't understand how to get into coaching, and we missed the ball getting them the resources that could help influence the sport. So this is where GSLA is going to make sure that we're catching any of those gaps that maybe the traditional athlete-minded training system doesn't necessarily always get. And it's exciting. You know, we did a high school athlete leadership development course. We had 15 athletes of all different athletic abilities from all around the country, all different backgrounds. And to watch those young people get together and share stories and share thoughts on leadership and just thoughts on life. To be honest, I would like to transition, if it's okay, talking about what do I relate to, right? You know, Tim, you said, you know, I've just related to myself as a wrestler, and now I'm going to stretch out into other areas. And I think sometimes in our sport, it's very easy to feel like wrestling is my identity, so everything has to be about tough and this and that. And I think what GSLA is saying is that, hey, your family is your support, because there are times when you are not going to be able to be tough enough for the moment. So where do you go? Who do you rely on? What are those things that you need to know about? What are the resources? You know, in my family, and I've probably learned this from Jen and going through the GSLA, something happens, I'm like, hey, what are our resources right now? Right?
You know, you bring up, I got so many things, and I'd like to talk from the best. Let's how do you say, capitalize on this opportunity, because I personally don't think there's anything more important that USA Wrestling's doing. So therefore, I personally, you know, and why? Because you're going back to all the characteristics that were important to Greg, which I think are the foundation for building what you're saying, you know, I mean, and so faith, family, discipline, consistency, and then what a great coach. And so as long as you stay kind of focused, not in a way to make Greg overly tributed, but the fact that his characteristics and so, first of all, what in support of the senior athletes, they are our future coaches. Okay. So, I mean, and so as we're working with athletes, junior or senior, look at many of them. I don't know who they are, but they're our future coaches. So yeah, that's really important. Personally. So therefore, people give to what's important. That's why you need to communicate. I'm writing a bigger check to USA Wrestling right now than I've ever written to support this program. And so therefore, I mean, this is an opportunity for people to do that, who are listening. I mean, nobody asked me to say that. It's just the truth. I mean, and I can't wait, I can't wait to write it. Actually, I use a credit card, but, and the other thing is partnerships. So I'll put my FCA hat on as you're saying, what is it? One thing you could do, Mike, is, like you said, there's Beat the Streets. You could offer opportunity. Hey, if someone's interested in growing in their faith, there's FCA, and we can connect you with FCA Wrestling. It's a opportunity. So you keep looking at opportunities. It could be that financial piece. You've got some people, hey, if you're interested in learning more, we partner with these people who would be glad to talk to you about financial independence and what that means. And then finally, I'll just, because I know we're coming short of time, I can't leave without, I'm just thinking how incredibly happy Greg is hearing this. And here's what he'd say. You've heard it if you've ever been around Greg too much, but he would sit there and he goes, I love it when a plan comes together. Hannibal from the A-Team. Said, Greg said, don't you love it when a plan comes together? And I think a plan's coming together.
Well, I tell you, the driving force is sitting in that corner of our screen right there with Jen. There is not enough that I think anybody can say about the leadership. Your skills and your qualities and those things are off the charts, but what you've done personally, I said USA Wrestling gained a full-time staff member who's already doing another full-time job, juggling her family, juggling her own, we talk about this coach well-being piece, right? Jen, I've always seen that you've got the smile on your face, right? Like no matter what you're juggling, how many balls are in the air at one point, you're always like, you know what, this is my calling. This is my passion. And I love doing this. I love helping people. And that energy is what drives this program.
Thank you.
Hey guys, so let me take it one step further. Let me ask, how can people get involved with the program? I mean, you know, you were talking about the national team athletes, but Mike, then you mentioned the high school leadership program. What are some opportunities? And if somebody's kind of just dialing in right now from a coaching perspective, or somebody even from the outside in the periphery, how could they actually jump on board and become part of the leadership program?
Jen, is that something you want me to jump on, or is that?
Yeah, why don't you start, and then I'll have some. I'm sure I'll have an addition. I'll have an addition. Go.
I'm sure too, and I'm glad, because I know how it goes. So yes, we have the GSLA donation page, so you can go on themat.com and you can donate directly. Like Tim said, you can throw your credit card on there, and we'd like to make giving us money very easy. We did have such a successful campaign last year, but resources are tough, right? Like, we know as we move forward on this program, when we need to bring in the right people to help share this information and provide these resources, you know, it's going to take those funds.
Right.
You know, Jen is going to be helping us in April at the U.S. Open, presenting the first Athlete Advisory Council's Leadership Award. So these are leadership awards to those who are stepping up, working with USA Wrestling in addition to their athletics, to help make sure that this environment is not just safe for our athletes, but it's the right environment for them to excel. So it's going to be really exciting to see that kind of growth as well. So Jen, what did I miss?
No, I think that's good. I mean, obviously it's important, right? I mean, it's, you know, we can do a lot of things in the absence of those funds, but I'll just be very transparent. I mean, they're important because of what we're trying to accomplish, what we're trying to do, and to make sure we have the right people or organizations, et cetera, in the face of our athletes when we need to do that. The other piece would be just as far as messaging and understanding more of what the GSLA is all about. We do have 3 social pages that we use pretty extensively, especially during the 30-day challenge. We're Instagram, Facebook, and tweeting every day. Some Strobelisms out there. So we're posting photos and commentary that, you know, Dad has put out there in the past. And I really appreciate, by the way, Tim, something that you said about being mindful. I call it mindfulness of, it's not about overly emulating Greg Strobel as much as what he brought to this world we want to see continued in this world, if that makes sense. You know, I said this at my dad's funeral, that, you know, he was my greatest, you know, he's the greatest, he's my dad, but I know how great a dad is because I know who his father is, and I know the father through my dad, if that makes sense, right? So there's all these wonderful characteristics that we want to see continue to be developed. But ultimately, we have some social pages, most notably, yes, on themat.com, though anybody can donate now or give now to provide any sort of funds for that. And then obviously to, you know, a check right to Colorado Springs, USA Wrestling, care of GSLA, it'll get there. So those are some definite needs. And then also just interaction, talking about it, spreading the word about it, retweeting it, forwarding it, share it on a story, do something. I think since yesterday, we have 28 new followers on Twitter, which I don't know if that's good or not good, but in my pea brain, I'm like, wow, 28 people since yesterday, I'll take it, right? It means we're getting a great message out there, and that's what it's about.
Tim, how much did your relationship with Greg form because of the values that you learned from Coach Dara and Coach Patton and Coach Briggs? And I grew up in Brooklyn, Iowa, watching Iowa Public Television and Chuck Patton, and it's a huge reason that wrestling is so successful. You said it. We've got to get wrestling into the living rooms if we're going to grow our sport. And Iowa Public Television, when I was growing up, did that. You know, I know you mentioned Coach Dara, and you know, we lost a great one with Dan McCool, but the history that man preserved in the sport, and what a great book. I'll make sure that, Jen, the donation links and the social media links are going to be in our description below. Tim, I'm going to make sure that the FCA links and all that kind of good information is in there. I'm going to got a link for this at the National Wrestling Hall of Fame and Gable Museum that'll be going in. So coaches, remember, there's a lot of great resources that are going to be right down in that description. But Tim, you had some amazing historical figures in Iowa and American wrestling that guided you. And I didn't know that you'd had an accident as a child that you had to overcome that and show a lot of resiliency where they encouraged it. So I'll shut up.
Well, it just that, yeah. I mean, I had my leg cut off by a lawnmower when I was about 7 years old, and an Eagle Scout, 17-year-old Eagle Scout, saved my life, my leg. But the long story is, I had 8 operations in 8 years, but Coach Dara never let me make excuses. Never let me. I mean, and he told me I could beat the world. And some funny stories, but I mean, he's a passionate man who just told me I had what it took. And to talk about Greg kept me grounded. The night before he died, we were texting because I had just gotten a brand new knee on my good knee. It had been my iron horse for 60 years. And finally, I needed a new knee in my good knee. And I still have my leg that was basically put back on. But I was telling him something, and I said, it's good, but I wish it was not so stiff. I wish this, although, because that's only 2 weeks out. And he came back and he said something, and I went, wow. He goes, his only text back was, good is good. And to me, he was kind of going, hey, good's good. Now, come on. And that's the last time Greg and I connected. That was the night before. Hey, good is good. And then to answer your question, though, I'll leave it. Life's about relationships. Right. Chuck Patton took me under his wing when I wrestled at Division III, co-college. Then I went to graduate school at Northern Iowa, and Chuck Patton and Don Briggs took me under their wing. Chuck Patton believed in me. I would have never gotten a head job at Mount Vernon, which was a great job at, Randy Majors, Paul Hufford, 4-timer, Greg Grant, all the, because he played golf with the principal and athletic director in college and said, this young guy will do a good job. When Steve Combs is looking for a person to expand the USA Wrestling, Chuck Patton saying, hey, Tim Johnson will do a good job. When he decides to retire from Iowa Public Television, they said, who can we get? Well, Chuck said, there's this guy down in Wichita, not coaching because it couldn't be a coach. Tim Johnson would do a good job. Life's about relationships. Yeah. I don't know where I'd be, but I know I wouldn't be where I'm at right now if it wasn't for Chuck Patton, one guy in my life who believed in me. Bob Dara, who turned a kid that was going upside down, right side up, because when I told him I couldn't play football in high school, and you don't not play football in Morning Sun. He was also the head football coach because you're dead to him if you don't play football. You were, I can't say it on here. You were a sissy. And he told me, as long as I wrestle, I'll be okay. Mm-hmm. Holy cow. I turned a kid that was ready to go upside down, right side up. And then Greg Strobel, a man from, 1979 to 41 years later, kept me grounded with a consistency that was attractive to me and a friendship that was bounded by love. And so thanks for asking. Life's about relationships, and there's just a small example.
We want people to hear USA Wrestling and say, that's where I want my child, right? If we can get people to say that, right? Because we're all somebody's kid, whether we're 50, 60, or 6.
Right.
That's where we want.
And we know who's coaching the kids, but who's coaching the coaches.
That's right.
And that's another great opportunity.
To the coach.
We have our copper, bronze, silver, and gold system. Once coaches get to that silver system, they work directly with our National Coaches Education Program. We link them with other coaches through networking so that they continue to share ideas. It's not about one way giving information or pushing information. This is a push-pull relationship in coach education once you get past the copper and bronze. And so I'll make sure there's some links there for the coach education piece. And man, we've got some amazing people that we get to share time with, don't we, Coach Hag?
Oh, no doubt about it. And it's just so great because having Tim on, we go way back. And I was telling you, Mike, earlier about our relationship when I first started working at USA Wrestling with the National Coaches Education Program and dialing in with Tim, and his guidance and direction was absolutely spot on with what some of the resources that we needed to include in our programming. and I know I've thanked you before, Tim, but that goes way back. And now getting to see Tim work with the Big Ten Network, getting a chance to visit with him pretty much on a weekly basis, following matches. It's just things change over time, but then they don't change so much either. So, Mike, is there anything else that you have that we probably ought to update our folks in regards to our Inside USA Wrestling events that are coming up or anything before we sign off? Is there anything that you can bring us up to speed on?
Yeah, I know really soon we're getting ready to announce Final X and World Team Trial locations. Pete Isaias and his event staff are getting ready to finalize that. They just came from that bout at the ballpark. How cool to be able to see everybody, about the history of the month and almost the day when we lost wrestling in the Olympics. This is going to be a chance every year, we're hoping, to be able to run this event and say, this is a celebration of wrestling. And I know right across from the stadium is the national, I'm going to screw this up, but it's our Medal of Honors, the Hall of Fame for the Medal of Honor winners. So again, I think maybe some future ways to tie some great leadership together with that. And of course, hopefully we'll have Jen presenting the Athlete Advisory Council Leadership Award at the US Open at the end of April in Las Vegas. Get your hotel rooms and your tickets early because the NFL Combine is in town that weekend. So if you're going out to Vegas, flights and all that stuff will start filling up quick. So that's probably the best update we've got now. Man, it's so awesome. I'm just jazzed.
Love your passion, man.
Yeah.
Tune into the Big Ten Network for the last two dual meets. It'll be Shane and I together this weekend. And if there's anybody that can make me look like I'm standing still, it's Shane Sparks. And so Jim and I kind of brought Shane up, and now he just going past us. And I'm just kind of, the old sage, kind of coming in for a landing, real proud of that. And then the Big Ten championships, we're going to cover every round again for the second year in a row, Saturday and Sunday. And it's going to be great in Lincoln, Nebraska. And so a little plug for the Big Ten Network. And then, of course, a great all kinds of conference championships that weekend and the NCAAs. It's just good to be back with fans in the stands.
Amen.
Well, guys, I can't tell you again how much I appreciate you guys jumping on. Jennifer, it's always great to see you.
Thank you.
Man, you bring so much to the show. Matter of fact, we ought to probably just make you a co-host and just say, just jump on with us.
You're only two-time appearer.
Yeah, so far, you're the only two-time appearance person that we've had.
I'm honored. Thank you.
Well, we do really appreciate it. And Timmy, it's so good to have you on. And we look forward to possibly having you guys back on again soon. Maybe giving us an update. And like you said, Mike, there's a lot of stuff that's getting ready to happen with USA Wrestling and some of the events coming up. So we'll try to keep everybody posted, and everything that we can think of will be dropped into the show notes. Mike, you do a great job with that. So much appreciated. And so for our Coaches Council Heads Up podcast, thanks for joining us, and we'll be back next time. Take care.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm excited to have you be a part of the second annual Greg Strobel 30-day Make a Weight Challenge. It starts on Wednesday, runs through March 10th. The link to how to participate and or donate is in the bio. But let me just say this. I love this challenge. I love that we are able to spend time in 4 very key areas of the Greg Strobel Leadership Academy, and that is family, accountability, discipline, and creating a lifetime of good habits. The Greg Strobel Leadership Academy is founded on those 4 principles. It has been a great year of developing content and creating forums and curriculum and really focusing on how do we support our athletes in the USA Wrestling community of all ages. So I'm just going to ask you, if you participated before, please participate again. Donated before, donate again. And we look forward to supporting each other. Thanks.